Hi, everybody. This is Al in Philadelphia, and I'm joined by my pals pretty much all over the place for week 3, ModPo Live 2020. Yay, we're excited. I'm going to give out some information, do an initial shout out, say hello to people, and then we're going to get started taking your questions. There's Max just joining us now. 610-616-3028. 610-616-3028 is the phone number.
It's actually Al 3208. 610-616-3208.
Oh my goodness, I cannot believe I screwed that up. We got to get a number.
You'd be wondering why we're not getting calls. Yeah.
All right.
Somebody's getting a lot of calls. You know, whoever has 3028 is getting a lot of calls this webcast.
Thank you, Chris. You can call, anybody can call us while we're doing the introductions to get started, 610-616-3208. And the Skype handle is ModPo Pen. Call from anywhere in the world. That should work out. So the Facebook group will be watched by Amber Rose. Hello, Amber Rose. How are you? You were muted there, but I took it that you said hello.
Hello.
Hi. Amber Rose is going to watch and probably what Amber Rose usually does is put a post there, and so you can respond to the post. The thread in the ModPo forums will be watched by Anna, and you can get there by going to the resources link, and then under resources, live webcasts, or you can go directly to the discussion forums to live webcasts, and there's already some stuff there. Lily is going to watch Twitter, and I think and Davey is going to watch the comment feed in the YouTube live stream. All right. I wanted to say hi to people and to our special guest, and then I wanted to start out with a shout out to one of our new friends, a first timer, Padmasini Ramji. I just wanted to talk a little bit about what Padmasini has been doing lately. But first, hello to Lily Applebaum. Hello, how are you?
Hey, Al, I'm good. How are you?
Good. It's good to see you. Davey Niddle, hey there.
Hey, Al.
As Davey knows, I'm a big fan of his wall, the wall that's behind, which changes color all the time. I know you're not controlling it, but it's just a great moody, beigey gray.
Just a wall, Al.
It's just a wall. I'm making too much of it. Overreading the wall. Kamara is here from somewhere in the Boston area. Hello, Kamara. Good to see you.
Hello. Good to be here.
And there's Allie Castleman. Enjoying the sun. The sun has just got you in the chin. It's like,
I need sunscreen.
It's like a pitcher facing a batter in Los Angeles at 4 p.m. Jake Marmer is here with a fabulous shirt and cap. Hello, Jake.
Hey, Al. Thank you. You're full of compliments.
Yeah, that's me. That's my only strength, actually, is I like to compliment people. Amber Rose Johnson, talk about compliments. It does not take any kind of particular complimenting type of person to compliment ARJ. Hello and good morning.
Hello and good morning to all of you.
Or good afternoon. And Amber Rose Johnson has Amber Rose Johnson's week 3 eyeglasses. And next week, there'll be week 4 eyeglasses.
Going with the tie-dye, giving you a palette today. Okay, hello.
Oh my gosh. Dave Poplar here from Arizona, Swing State. It's purple out there, and you're looking a little purple today, although I know you're blue most days. Anna Safford. Hello, Anna. It's good to see you. And those of you who wonder where the amazing daughter is, the daughter is sleeping flat on her back. And we
hope it stays that way.
90 more minutes of sleep. And there's Max. Max is here. Maxime from Chicago. Good to see you. Erica.
Good afternoon, Al.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Well, it's still 11 a.m. for you. Erica Kaufman from the beautiful, beautiful Hudson Valley, which is starting to look nice, I bet. This beautiful.
Hey, Al.
Jess Schollenberger. Hey, Jess. Good to see you. And Bob Perlman, our special guest, a wonderful poet, longtime colleague. We just adore him. He's like the nicest person in the world and a fine poet too. And so Bob's going to join us as he has done in previous years. And of course he doesn't think of himself this way, but he is a week 8 poet, but he has a lot to say about weeks 3 and 4. sometimes he's visited us during the Stein Week, week 4. There's a memorable set of clips of Rachel Blau Duplessis and Bob meeting us there for week 4. But today it's week 3. And of course, Zach and Chris. Zach is handling the video, Chris, the audio. And so hello, everybody. I just wanted to start. Oh yeah, I'm going to plug Bob's reading now and also at the end. Tonight at 6 p.m. the Kelly Writers House, joined by ModPo, will be hosting a poetry reading by Bob Perlman, and we'll be featuring some poems from this new book, Jack and Jill in Troy, by Bob, published by Roof Books, roofbooks.com, and you should go take a look at it. And you'll be very excited, I think, after the reading, which will be a 35-minute reading plus 25 minutes of Q&A moderated by me, 6 p.m., and I will resend the link to that. All right, just wanted to shout out to Padmasini Ramji. Padmasini has been very active, first-timer, lives in Secaucus, New Jersey, tries to work at her makeshift desk in her bedroom in this pandemic, has participated in office hours, most notably Lily's, where they engaged in a really, really interesting conversation about William Carlos Williams' Danse Russe, during which Padmasini said, "I'm not sure if it's Jersey-ishness," Lily had asked if there was a Jersey feel to the poem, "or just suburban, but the idea of the action happening elsewhere in New York." So we sort of speculate that Williams is dancing and trying to be avant-garde there, the Russian dance, while all the cool stuff is happening across the river in New York. And Padmasini adds that it is that sense of the action happening elsewhere is captured in Danse Russe, and that it feels really accurate to her. And she's also relating in the context of her trying to work on her makeshift desk in her bedroom. She's also relating to the weight of domesticity, especially this year in lockdown, when I feel all I've done is cooking, cleaning, and childcare. By the way, I'll note 3 things that William Carlos Williams didn't particularly do himself, but he was in the house where it got done. And Padmasini's riffing with Lily was totally great. And one more thing, Padmasini has really praised ModPo around and Poem Talk. And here's a quote: "Thanks to you and all the TAs for this community and for making poetry more accessible." Exclamation point. "I'm glad to have found this community, especially in the times we're in, and I'm grateful to be unraveling these poems and thinking about them, to be able to find that human connection with others in ModPo. It is keeping me from falling into despair because of everything that's happening in the world right now. Thank you for this gift." Thank you, Padmasini Ramji, for being part of ModPo. It is just great to see you around. So, Chris, did someone make a call while we were doing all those intros? Chris Martin? Chris is either falling asleep or is listening to someone. All right.
Listening to someone.
I don't know what he's doing, but I'm going to make a list of poems, and I'm going to ask Dave Poplar to just pick one of them that we should start talking about. Okay. So we talked about H.D. Rose, 2 poems by Pound, Station of the Metro, The Encounter, Stephen's 13 Ways of Looking at a Blackbird, a bunch of Williams poems, including Between Walls, This Is Just to Say, and The Red Wheelbarrow, in contrast with or comparison with Marcel Duchamp, and Fountain, which is the urinal turned upside down, A Nude Descending a Staircase, Duchamp, Haiku from Tanya Foster's A Swarm of Bees in High Court, and lots of interesting things in ModPo Plus, Ray Armentrout, lots of H.D., Elliot Pound, Hugh McDermott, lots of Stevens, and 3 Japanese poets who were responding to US and British imagism. Interestingly, there's a kind of reciprocality going on there. The influence of imagism on Japanese postmodernism, and then of course the influence of Japanese haiku and other forms of imagism on imagism itself. And Marianne Moore. Dave Poplar, tell us where we should start.
I love talking about William Carlos Williams's lines along with Between Walls. I think those 2 poems go pretty nicely together.
Let's just do lines.
Okay.
Let's just do lines. Would you read lines? And I'm going to ask Jake and Bob Perlman to respond to the
Lines.
tiny little poem.
Lines. Leaves are gray-green, the glass broken bright green.
And read it one more time.
Leaves are gray-green, the glass broken bright green.
Jake, some people might say, what the hell? How does that pass for a poem? It's 2 lines. It doesn't really say anything. And how would you make a rejoinder to that?
I want to just like this morning think a little bit about what it means for a poet to exercise this degree of removal, you know, of a kind of a lyrical self, of one's own biography and kind of like feelings that are kind of like out there and explicit, and what that removal feels like. You can almost like palpably feel the absence, even as, of course, it's informing everything that's in those 2 lines. There is a mood that's in those 2 lines, and then of course there's like just messiness of like gray green, one word, and then bright green. It almost feels like a sloppy rhyme, but of course it's not, from gray green to bright green. Yeah, just some first thoughts.
Cool. Can you say, before we turn to Bob, can you say more about the removal? Are you saying that Williams is pretending or trying or fantasizing about looking at something objectively?
Well, I don't know if it's a matter of objectivity, but just trying to almost impassionately describe what's visible, describe the image. It's powerful to just like try to state what's out there, whether or not there is kind of like a pretense or aspiration towards objectivity. Just watching or trying to observe intensely.
Bob Perman, were you ever so naive a poet as to think you could see something and simply describe it that precisely as this?
Oh gosh, no. I it's funny. No, I don't think I ever was. I mean, I'm suddenly reminded of the first poet I ever read, Whitman, and you know, as a teenager, I thought, oh, this is, you know, a fantastic description. And then reading him over the next, all these decades, you just realize how much of his self is in there. But I took it for description at first. So I think at the beginning, you know, it's really hard to tell your own feelings apart from, it's hard to really tell subjectivity and objectivity apart, I think, at the beginning of things. About this poem, though, this strikes me as very conscious on Williams' part, and that this is the time when there seems like a dual impulse in the Pound Williams, the various circles, the modernist circles back then. There's the impulse toward epic and doing the really big poem that I think stirred a lot of poets. But also there's the, this is another kind of goal to achieve, the very, very short poem. I mean, this isn't just all he wrote. This is a kind of an act to make it this short. It's a very strong gesture. It's not just an accident. It's a provocation, you might say.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
And you know, just to piggyback on one thing that Jake said about the gray green, I think it's deliberately, it's a faux naive, the green semi rhyme there. But what he's doing with the words, combining words like gray green, which in Williams of this period, this is a kind of avant-garde gesture to write gray green as one word. And it blurs the colors. And then on the next line, you have the broken glass and you have all these broken words, 5 little broken words in bright green, broken open. So it's mimicking the shards
That's right.
of glass, I think.
Which is why Dave thought of Between Walls in association with it. Thank you both, Jake and Bob and Dave, for choosing that poem. I'd like to ask Anna, who's maybe turned off to take care of a baby, I don't know, and also Davey, Amber Rose, and Lily to look in various social media to see what we've got. Davey, anything happening in the YouTube feed?
Lots of general excitement about week 3 and lots of good conversation about additions to the syllabus, excitement about the Foster, about the additions to ModPo Plus, and it might be interesting to talk about some of those poems. It seems like folks are excited to see them in the syllabus.
That's great. I think while I'm turning to others, Davey, would you choose one of the haiku pairs, just one pair, so that we might be able to talk about if there's time? Your general sense is that the YouTube people are pretty knowledgeable ModPo people, and they're seeing the differences between this year and previous years. That's good. Anna,
Yeah.
something from the thread?
Yeah, Al, we have this really nice question from Denny that I think you responded to earlier.
Yeah, can you summarize it?
Sure. Denny's wanting, aka Nicholas Stern, one of our much beloved CTAs, is wondering how the imagists inform the language poets. So maybe a nice question for our special guest today. And in what ways the imagists and language poets think similarly and differently about language. The imagists, Denny writes, repeatedly wanted to use the exact word and to be concrete and constructing a tangible image as opposed to being abstract. But isn't language inherently abstract? How do language poets think about this? Do they embrace or eschew abstraction as the modernists are said to have done? Is the abstract in poetry definable, and is it distinctly different from the abstract in visual art?
There's a lot going there, but I saw Denny's question and really love it. And after we turn to Amber Rose and Lily on Facebook and Twitter, I wonder if Max, Erica, and Bob Perlman would each take very briefly a shot at the question of how the language poets looked back to the imagists, not just figures like Williams or HD in general, but the imagist phase of them, the imagist impulse. It won't be an easy question to answer, but I can't wait to hear. So we'll come back to that in a second. Lily, Twitter, how's that happening?
Well, I'm excited to share that Ray Maxwell is sharing some of just the cutest pictures from our DC trip, which he identified as 2013, which I think is right. And yeah, really cute pics of us in front of the National Portrait Gallery, and then all having looks like beers afterwards. I personally have no memory of this trip, but I'm sure that it was really fun.
Well, you're in the picture, and also Steve McLaughlin, who used to do audio for us, is in the picture. One of the great characters.
That was a long time ago now.
It was. That's great. All right, thanks, Lil. Amber Rose, anything happening in Facebook to speak of? Which is a general existential question we ask all the time, but.
Yes. Well, in the ModPo specific Facebook group, Mandana offered a question kind of building on the conversation that was just happening. It says, when one's emotions are too much to bear, is imagism, that removal of self, a way to manage what is too overwhelming, too inexpressible in words? Given that imagism gave rise in the early 20th century, the First World War, pandemics, political revolutions, might this have been a way to get out of the heaviness of the heart and mind, the exhaustion of thinking and overthinking?
Wow. Allie and Jess, did you hear Mandana's question well enough in a few minutes to respond to it? The gist of it was, is it possible to see imagism as essentially socially and politically responsive? Which is not the typical reading. Well, it is somewhat the typical reading, but it's not a ModPo type reading where we focus on the poems. So I'd love to hear you on that, Allie and Jess. But first, let's go back to Denny. So Max, Erica, and Bob, take each a quick shot at this. Do you see a line drawn back from the language poets to the imagists. Max first.
Yeah, I see a line in the use of parataxis, or more specifically, parataxis as a way of accessing the materiality of language. As Bob was just saying with the Williams poem, there's Williams is breaking down and recombining words in order to get at something that goes beyond just the simple meaning of it. And I think we see that too with the language poets, and with the new sentence, with this perhaps on a slightly higher order than the word, maybe, getting up to the order of syntax, right? Like seeing how these different units can be separated, recombined in a way to get beyond, I would say, a semantic meaning and towards something that's more like materiality.
Wow. You're saying, I think, Max, that when you encounter something like the Poundian radical condensation of the station of the metro at the Metro poem, that radical condensation forces non-syllogistic language where you get a line and then a colon and then another and then another line, and the two don't relate except juxtapositionally. That may have started something that the language poets were very interested in later. Yeah, is that sort of what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. I think bringing together these two, as you said, syllogistically, these two images or clauses, and trying to triangulate and allow a sort of third to emerge.
I read, Erica and Bob, I read literary historically, I read the language poets as partly an attempt to re-radicalize early modernism. I know Bob Perlman has written about that, so more or less. So I'm not in bad company there. Erica, can you quickly draw a line between the imagists and the language poets? I should say, for first-time ModPo people, we're talking about the week 8 poets, so we got a ways to go before we get to them.
Yeah, it's interesting to build on what Max is saying about parataxis. There also seems to be a line drawn with the attention to words as individual units. And for the imagists, there's, Pound's idea of, use absolutely no word that doesn't contribute to the poem or to the presentation of the topic of the poem. And I think about the impulse of language poetry, as Al was saying, to kind of re-radicalize the attention to the way that words refer to one another, through a disruption of that kind of referentiality.
Yes, that's really great. Bob, keep whatever you were about to say in mind, because we have a caller, and I don't want to lose the caller, but I won't forget, because I'm really curious. We all are, to hear your comments on this. We have a caller. Her name is Tara. Tara is the sister of the already famous Danny Whitty, who is participating in ModPo and is unable to speak for himself, who, like our other Dan, also types or writes what he wants to say. So, Chris, would you bring Tara up, please?
Yes, and so Tara is on the line now and should hopefully be hearing us right now. Are you there, Tara?
Yes, I am. Hi.
Hi, Tara. This is Al. How are you?
Good. Danny, you want to say hi to Al? Yeah.
Hey, Danny. So you guys are in New Jersey somewhere?
No, we're in San Diego.
San Diego. Why did I had the impression New Jersey? Maybe something Dan Bergman told me. You're in San Diego. It's very early out there. Great. How yeah, Danny, can you tell us a little bit about what ModPo has been like for you so far?
Dan, he's really excited about the call, so he's pacing around. Okay. What has the ModPo experience for you so far?
Incredible.
He said, so incredible. I'm sure he'll want to, with more time, he'd have a lot more to say, but that's his short answer.
Okay, that's cool. So Tara, did you and Danny want to, or did Danny want to pose a question about week 3, or do you want us to ask Danny?
he asked me to help him make a bold phone call. So he dictated his question to me with some brief explanation of why he's asking.
Great. Go ahead, please.
All right. So he wants to know what imagism means to you, the teaching team. And he wants to know how it's appreciated by academics, because respectfully, it doesn't seem widely relevant to the public. In other words, are we really moved by it? Yes, I like it, but it doesn't move me like Emily Dickinson or even Walt Whitman. So that's quite simple yet quite broad question to you guys.
That's great. Tara, let me ask you and Dan, that's such a great question. I'm going to ask a couple of my colleagues here to answer, but I wonder if you and Danny could say goodbye and then hang up so we can get another call.
Of course.
Okay. Is Danny nearby?
Yeah, Danny, you want to say anything?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
He says thank you. Yeah, thank you for your time, and we are really enjoying the course.
Thank you. And I hope that you guys will call regularly and stay in touch. You give Danny our best.
All
Danny,
right.
you're the best. It's great to get to know you. All right. Thank you. The number is 610-616-3208. And I want to ask Kamara, Lily, and Amber Rose to respond to Danny's question, which is, what is imagism like for, I guess Danny was really asking about why academics like imagism, because he himself felt a greater connection to Whitman and Dickinson. Maybe the imagists are a little too cerebral or leave him cold, but he's obviously interested in why we like it. So who did I ask to do it? Lily first?
Sure. One thing that I really appreciate about imagism that our face-to-face conversation in English 88 made me think about yesterday was actually almost an architectural connection. We talked about between walls in our class, and I think what my studying of that poem over many years has sort of made me think about is how to reconceptualize these like ugly or forgotten seeming spaces in cities and other like modern architectural spaces as places where there is meaning or beauty or a different kind of beauty to see, not as spaces to just simply like walk by. That Williams poem is about finding something to write about and talk about, even in like a gross like little back patio or wherever where you're taking a smoke break or something. And so I think for me, that's something I really appreciate, that they make a lot of room, that they show you how to look at an architectural space, and that they also make a lot of room for you to be in the poem, because they're not full of so many different kinds of connotations and meanings.
Great, thank you. Kamara, what are your thoughts about that in response to Danny? I mean, Danny, it seems to be asking for us to give him some guidance as to how he can begin to enjoy this poetry.
Yeah, I think that for me, I remember taking English 88, and I remember this week. And I remember this week being one of the first weeks where I asked myself, is this a poem? And I remember those questions for myself being really important for me and really opening for me. Specifically the William Carlos Williams poems, Lines and Between Walls. And so that's the first thing, that they just opened a lot of things for me about what a poem could do and where we could look for that. And then the second thing, I guess, is sort of building off what Lily was saying, was these poems really, they're very focused. And I think that focus was something I really admire, and it makes me want to focus on each word as a unit. And that sort of attention, especially more now when I feel like my attention span is shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. I appreciate the attention on such a small thing. And so those are things I appreciated way back then about imagism and what I appreciate now sort of about it.
Great, thank you. Amber Rose, what are your thoughts about that?
So I think this is actually one of my one of the weeks where I think I feel sort of similar, or I have felt sort of similar to Danny. And I was talking with Mandana about this in my office hour, and was pushed to really think about what imagism does for me or what I find productive. And I think something that really stands out for me is that it's very much about the politics of looking and about our position in relationship to whatever we're looking at. And the emphasis on that relationality, I think, is really interesting, such as in 13 Ways of Looking at a Blackbird, where we have all of these different positions, and we can see how between potentially two subjects, or a subject and an object, as time is passing, our viewing of that thing is going to necessarily change. And maybe one other thing is just that I think I was looking at the Imagist statement, and they try to drive for really precise words, but words and descriptions can actually never be precise. So in looking for the precise objective word, I think that turns back and highlights who is producing that word, or assigning that word to what they're seeing.
Yeah, that's really great. You said a bunch of really great things there. And one of them implies the following, which is that it is our job in 2020, or whenever it is that we're reading this stuff, it is our job to see who it is that's making these statements, and see the context, and accept the steps forward. But the claim of precision and objectivity is being made by a subject. We have someone on the phone. I want to bring Melissa up, and then ask Melissa. Well, let's get Melissa up, and I'll tell her what we're going to do. Melissa, hi.
Hi, Al. How are you?
It's good to hear from you. You're Melissa Silver from the Boston area.
Yep, that's me. Same one.
We met last year, wasn't it? Last year we were in Boston, or the year before?
Yep. Both. Yeah.
That was fun. Thank you for calling.
That was really fun.
Stay on the line. I know you're gonna ask us a question or make a comment, but I want to turn back to Bob Perlman, who was asked before to draw a line between imagism and the language poets, and I want to ask him to do it briefly. And then we'll turn back to you, okay? Melissa?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hold on. Bob, sorry to delay that, but
That's
very
all right.
curious to hear what kind of, there's nothing that works here as a brief answer, but give it a try.
I'll try to be brief. Yeah, no, there's, on the one hand, I think there's basic differences in that language writing, to generalize about it, was about experimentation and doing lots of different things with language. And it was expansive in general. I mean, something like the new sentence of a book of, say, of Ron Silliman's that's 80 pages long of new sentences is, maybe each one sentence is like concise like an Imagist poem, but it's putting it all together. So that's a big difference. A similarity is the sense of imagism thinking about writing, that it's something that that there can be a poetics. In fact, there needs to be a poetics. You don't just write, you think about the art. And I think that had a big influence.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, I love that answer. Thank you. I hope everybody's taking notes. We're going to turn to Melissa, and I'm going to ask whatever Melissa asks. I'm going to ask Davey and Allie to respond. So, Melissa, hi again. How are you?
Good. Thanks.
This is your third or fourth year with ModPo, or longer?
Yeah, no, something like that. 4 or 5. 5,
Yeah,
I think.
Great,
Yeah.
great. Go ahead. What question do you have for us?
Well, Amber Rose actually talked about this much more intelligently than I can. So I'm real fascinated by what she said. I was intrigued with Mandana's question also about imagism and social relevancy, because I feel we're in a similar time now, and that it's not between imagism and social relevancy, but I think there's a similar correlation in that for years, many poets who were talking about social oppression were shut out, including of academia. And some of the poetry readings I'm hearing, poets are addressing some of this oppression. And I think that that's typically considered socially relevant. And at the same time, do sound poets do forms of abstraction nowadays, which I'm comparing to images, and the people who have a focus on language, isn't that also socially relevant? But I feel Amber answered that in terms of she was talking about perception.
Yeah.
And I feel this interest in language and perception is socially relevant. And I think Mandana's question points to an issue that's going on now in poetry, I feel.
That's great. Melissa, what I'd like to do, with your permission, is combine your question with Mandana's and ask, I had already asked Allie, Jess, to respond to Mandana's question. Now I'll ask Davey to join Allie and Jess in responding to both. So does that sound like a good approach?
Sure, great.
Okay, thanks. Would you hang up and listen to our responses through the webcast, and that'll open up the line for someone else. Thanks, Melissa. Hope everything's well with you.
Yeah, everybody stay safe. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Melissa. That's Melissa Silva from the Boston area. 610-616-3208. The line is open. And we're going to hear Allie, Jess, and Davey. Why don't we start with Davey? So I kind of botched a summary of Mandana's questions, more about managing what's too overwhelming. It involves repression. It involves keeping from being affected by the misery around us. Melissa's question is a little more straightforward. So Davey, you want to take a shot at it, and then we'll turn to Allie and Jess?
Sure. There's a great conversation happening in the YouTube chat that I bring up for its relevance to this question, that is about the non-universality of precision, about this conversation about like all poets are trying to be precise, but precision is itself linguistically, culturally, historically, socially, politically situated, that you're doing a kind of, in trying to be exact, you are doing a kind of subjective work. And that seems to be in dialogue with both Mandana and Melissa's questions. And I love Mandana's language of whether the imagists are trying to get out of the heaviness of the heart. And I guess I think about the imagists as trying to get into the heaviness of the heart, trying to understand, what is this thing? Like, what is the texture of this? And how do I engage in a practice of observation that's about attention, that's about presence? We had a great conversation in my office hour yesterday about all of the non-human life in these poems. And I keep thinking about just the fact that these poems are full of plants and non-human animals. And I wonder if they're a practice in paying attention and a way of, in dialogue exactly with what Mandana and Melissa are asking, of attention as a way of negotiating trauma, attention and a kind of, I'm going to use the phrase interspecies belonging, a way of being with others that is about more than human others, as well as human others. That's a strategy for how to deal with trauma.
Wow. Wow, that's really great. I'm glad you took the question in that direction. I want to turn to Allie and then Jess, and meanwhile also say hello to Jason, who just joined us. Hey, Jason. You know, Davey, you and I can have this conversation in another context because it'll open up a lot of things. I've been rereading the early Ernest Hemingway, who is like the champ of repression and denial, and uses a Steinian language to accomplish all kinds of difficult and mostly nasty things in trying to describe the world of atrocity around him, World War I era. Very interesting to try to get a retake on Hemingway that way. It might be. Allie, and then Jess.
I love Mandana's question. I love Davey's response. I'm very overwhelmed with both of them. And I don't feel like I have a ton to add. But I think I was already thinking about 13 ways of looking at a blackbird.
Oh, yeah.
And Davey got me thinking more about 13 ways of looking at a blackbird. And I mean, my instant reaction when we heard Mandana's question for the first time was like, yes, absolutely. That feels to me like a very natural response. And I'm also thinking a lot about what we were talking in terms of what I actually kind of approach as more of a like fiction strategy in when you're describing anything kind of like external. That's a very good like technique to get to interiority. But I know just looking at 13 ways and thinking about like what's being repressed. Get back to me in 1 second. I've kind of lost my train of thought, but I'll
That's fine. I promise to do that, actually. I want to turn to Jess. I just want Jake literally, while Jess is getting ready to speak, Jake literally quote the chat text that you just posted.
Oh, thank you. I was just sharing on chat on the subject of imagism and repression and how do you deal with environment that may be too much. Just a week ago, you know, when skies turned orange here in the Bay Area because of the smoke, and people were taking pictures and posting it almost as a way of handling trauma, you know, to David's comment, like what's there to say except take a picture and post it in social media, and it's a very strange way of dealing with it, maybe. But what else could you possibly do? And I think the emotional question there, maybe getting back to Dan's earlier question about what is emotional about it. I mean, there's so much emotion there that people were kind of having and maybe repressing as they were taking photos of the orange sky. And the other side of it is that it was strange and terrifying, but it was also so beautiful. It's like we all went out to take photos of it. Something deathly but beautiful about it.
Long dotted line back from those Instagrams without comment, I noticed, about orange skies, a long dotted line going back to Williams seeing in the empty courtyard at a time of lots of death in the middle of the Depression in a hospital, writing about a piece of broken green glass without comment about the humanity there. There's all kinds of ways you can read that. Jess, I want to turn to you, and then we've got someone on the phone, someone very special.
Thanks, Al. This is a really fascinating discussion that we're all having, and I want to circle back to Jake's initial point about the removal of self that seems to be happening in imagism. And I think in the context of Mandana's question, and thinking about imagism and that precision, which as Davey rightly noted, is not a neutral thing, and it can be exclusionary and a kind of narrowing. So that's important to take account of. But this idea of imagism as a kind of response to an overwhelming emotional state, to then a removal of self would seem like a natural response, and yet my skepticism with respect to imagism, I think, led me to say no, essentially, to Mandana's question, is can we think about imagism this way? And I want to acknowledge that, but I also want to say that I think Mandana's question is leading me to look with a bit more generosity to imagism, and to say that just managing something overwhelming is worthwhile, and that turning to things and, you know, non-human animals, overlooked things, small things, as folks have been saying, with that kind of attention, is worthwhile. And it's not only a way to deal with trauma, I think, but it's also a way to like express desires that maybe could not be expressed otherwise. It gives a language to those desires. And for me, unsurprisingly, this leads directly into Stein's work.
Yes.
And ways of expressing desires that have no other recourse language.
That's really brilliant. And I hope at the end, when I go around and ask for cheerleading for week 4, which is mostly Stein, maybe you'll repeat a version of that. We've got someone on the phone, and I'm going to ask in advance for Bob, Dave, and Jason to respond to whatever it is Sharon is going to ask us. So let's bring Sharon up on the phone. It's Sharon Wells, right, Chris?
That's right, Al. On the line now.
Sharon, can you hear me?
Yes, hi, Al, it's me.
Sharon, how's Smuggler doing?
Smuggler's very well, thank you.
Is he right near you?
He's not far away. He's
all right.
A little bit sort of desperate to get his dinner, so he's not paying a lot of.
Oh, it's dinner time there in the UK. Okay, well, tell Smuggler.
Yeah.
Poetry comes first, Smuggler second.
Oh yeah, of course.
Smuggler and I, when we were in London with the ModPo gang, and you guys made the long trip to London, Smuggler and I became pretty good buddies, I have to say. Yeah. Sharon, go ahead. Do you have this is like year 8, I want to say, for you in ModPo. Is that right? Or 7?
Well, no, I think it's probably 6. 6 or 7, I'm not sure, something like that.
Yeah. Somebody in this internal group just asked who Smuggler is. Do you want to describe Smuggler?
He's a box across something mutt with very large paws. And there's lots of pictures of him on the dogs and cat thread.
In ModPo, that's right.
In ModPo, yeah.
Davey
he pops
knows
up all over the place.
Yeah, I wish we could all meet Smuggler. And Smuggler is very unusual in that he likes being on a boat for days at a time.
He does, yeah. He loves being on the boat, and he's a little bit unsettled at the moment because we've been packing for weeks. We're moving, and we've had a very prolonged waiting for exchange period, and he's just but we're moving to a house with a mooring at the bottom of the garden where we can moor the boat outside.
Great. Yeah,
quite
these guys do canals and rivers days and days and almost weeks at a time. So anyway, Sharon,
under normal circumstances, but of course this year has been very different, really, hasn't it?
You're not allowed to moor in a marina. Is that what's happening?
No, but we are in a marina, but we weren't allowed to visit it for about 3 months, and then we weren't allowed to stay on it because it's classed as a second home. And we could go on it now, but because we're in the throes of moving, we can't go. So we haven't had any long trips this year. Not the ones that involve several hundred miles like we usually do. So
yeah. Well, while you're packing tonight, I guess, what are you, 6 hours different from us? It'll be
5.
5. It'll be 11 p.m. while you're packing. Come back for Bob Perlman's reading.
I intend to. Yes.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I'm going to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think you really enjoy the new poems.
Probably in bed.
Oh well, ModPo in bed. I mean, this is the great thing about a poet giving a poetry reading in a time of pandemic, because everybody's in bed, and the poet, it's pretty cool. Sharon, what question or comment do you have? I've asked Dave, Bob Perlman, and Jason to respond to whatever it is.
I didn't ring in with a specific comment, only that, and you've already touched on 13 Ways, only that 13 Ways is probably my favourite poem of this week, and it was just how much of it I thought applied to the current situation with the pandemic. I mean, you could take almost any line from any of the stanzas, and it just shrieks.
Wow, do you have the poem near you by any chance? I know you're packing, but...
I do have it in front of me, yes.
Do you want to pick a section Pick a section that screams pandemic to you. I'm very curious.
Well, the Blackbird World in the Autumn Winds, it was a small part of the pantomime. I think small part of any pantomime at the moment.
That's brilliant. Read that again. Read that again slowly, Sharon.
Yeah. The Blackbird World in the Autumn Winds, it was a small part of the pantomime.
Great. Fantastic.
And
Okay.
also
Yep. Go
the
ahead.
bit about the blackbird whistling or just after, everything is so strange at the moment, isn't it? And the mood traced in the shadow, it's just so many parts of it just feel like the uncertain times that we're in. And they are very uncertain here at the moment. We're right on the edge of things again here. So
well, as bummed out as I am, and we are, Sharon, I'm heartened by the fact that you can return to this poem for the 6th, 7th, 8th time and see its connection to us. So we've got 2 sections you've repeated. And so will you
actually I think probably more than the last one I said, the boards of euphony would cry out sharply. He's that one is definitely, yeah.
Wow. I love it. Okay, so will you'll hang up and make sure you tell Smuggler I said hello. Give him a little scratch behind the ears for me. And
okay,
then we'll respond here while you listen online and send in a question during at the end of the Perlman reading. You're welcome to do that. And we'll see you soon.
Yes, I will.
All right.
Okay.
Great.
Good to speak to you, Al.
Yes, same here. That was Sharon Wells from the UK. So first Dave, then Bob, then Jason, briefly in response to anything that Sharon said, maybe the question of how this cubistic poem, 13 Ways, speaks to us in this current situation. That would be it's a reading I hadn't thought of. Dave Poplar?
I love the first stanza, especially. It might be my favorite stanza in the whole poem. Number 3, the blackbird word in the autumn winds. It was a small part of the pantomime. From a ModPo perspective, I love it because it's so meta. I mean, I think this whole poem is sort of a pantomime, which is sort of like using gestures to convey meaning. Each stanza is sort of a gesture. Like you explained in the video introduction, each one of these stanzas could be seen as sort of an imagist perspective, but you put it all together and it's sort of a cubist depiction.
Right.
And bringing it back to our situation now, I mean, one of my favorite sayings is, we're all in this together. And in a sense, this poem is sort of enacting that. I guess Cubism sort of enacts that. Even looking at a certain thing, there's so many different facets of it, but it's taking it all together, which is important.
I really like that. You put me in mind of a thing that leadership, all kinds of leaders have failed to see about the way in which masking and other ways of keeping the thing at bay is a collaboration. It's a crowdsourcing, right? I always think of what we're doing as some version of the following: everyone is smarter than anyone.
Yep.
Right. And I mean, literally, when the species is threatened by something that infects us, it's an everyone situation. We have to think species level or beyond. And no anyone is going to solve that. It's got to be everyone. And that's the spirit of what we do. That's the spirit of 13 different ways, 50 ways of dealing with a pandemic. Bob Perlman, what are your thoughts about what Sharon said, or about poetry in the pandemic, or about Stephen's Blackbirds?
Well, gosh, first of all, I want to say I got somehow bounced out of email.
Yeah, that's all right. And then you moved to a new location. So that's
I moved yes, closer to the Wi-Fi source.
Okay.
So we hope that works. Anyway, let's see. So there was one thing I want to back up one set of questions about thinking about imagism. And just to sort of say for the record, historically, imagism started out as a very fashionable impulse before World War I. It was definitely what the cool kids were doing, as opposed to everybody else. So there was a sort of a separatist gesture going on there. And then all of a sudden World War I happens, and imagism gets thrown in the soup with everything else. And it does have a long shelf life, and people are still interested in very, very short poems. But
Yeah.
just to say that there's that funny little divide from where it started and then what happened to it. Anyway, about the about the Blackbird poem, I'm just totally focused on now on this the bawds of euphony, which is it's not the bards of euphony, it's not the poets of nice sounds, it's the gigolo, the like a bawdy house, the procurers of euphony. I mean, it's a very insulting term, but it's self-ironizing because Stevens is nothing if not euphonious. I mean, he himself is a kind of, purveyor of euphony. So euphony. So anyway,
I like that. Thank you, Bob. Jason, briefly in response to anything that Sharon said or the pandemic and cubism. Hi.
Unmuted. Okay. I was outside looking at blackbirds and thus had to be late. I kept getting mesmerized by the different ones I saw. It's a more complicated story, but anyway, I think that I want to go back specifically to what Davey was saying about kind of speciesism and kind of the way in which thinking, being aware of our cohabitation of the world with other beings is itself a comment, like it is a kind of thing in which you can get lost in and impossibly reflect on. And what really strikes me about, which I don't even think I've noticed before, but just the very first stanza is, I mean, among 20 snowy mountains, the only moving thing was the eye of the blackbird. And I mean, throughout the poem, there's an enormous amount of wordplay. And so what exactly does moving mean? And what is I mean, this is section 1 with a Roman numeral I, which is reflected in the eye of the blackbird.
Right.
And what's so odd about it is if I try to imagine a blackbird's eye, I don't see it, even if it might be moving around, I kind of imagine a blackbird's eye as appearing all black. So
right.
To, what does it mean to see movement in the kind of perception of a being that isn't human, I think is crucial, and in a way, I think for people who really love this poem, I want to really strongly recommend I believe it's a Danish documentary called Kestrel's Eye, which I'll post a link to on Twitter and Facebook. That seems as close in film as I've ever gotten to this poem.
That is really cool. Jason, thank you so much for that. And by the way, Allie has composed section 14 of 13 Ways, and it goes like this. Jason, you haven't seen it yet, I don't think.
Okay.
14. I was outside looking at blackbirds, and thus I had to be late. Yay! They're now 14. We have someone on the phone, a dear friend from far away, and somehow, Davey, I'm going to construe this question as leading us to the Tanya pairs of haiku. So take that as an advance warning that we're going to switch that way. I'll call upon some people to comment on it. Okay, Chris, who is it on the phone from Siberia?
From Siberia calling via Skype, we have Tan on the line.
Great. All right, Tan,
Hi,
can you
Tan.
hear me?
I can, yeah. Can you hear me?
Hey, yes, you sound great.
Wonderful.
Do you see that little Sylvie is up? Sylvie, can you say hi to Tan?
Yeah. Oh, she's
Let's
so
get a little-
cute.
Yeah.
She's so cute. She's adorable.
Yeah. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, or at least, as fine as one can in these trying times.
And your
How are
students?
you?
Oh, thank you for asking. Nobody ever does that. I'm fine. I'm great. Hanging around with you guys. Anna's like giving me shit here. Of course, Al, people do ask how you're doing. Sorry. That was a little attention drawing. But Ton did ask. Jake's putting on the poor me face. What is teaching like? You normally teach online, is that correct?
Yeah, I do.
So this is
I
not a
get
change.
exhausted from people, and I cannot really teach like face to face. So
Great.
I teach online anyway.
This
But
works for you.
I called you back in May when we had the last webcast of the last season of ModPo.
Yeah.
And at the time, everything was like, I was having a great time here. I was not seeing people.
That's what you said.
It
I
was
remember.
just great. And now it's not.
Yeah. And why do you think that is?
It's just been too long.
Yeah.
It honestly has just been too long. And because I don't really, have friends in the city that are easily accessible or like hangouts or chats or Skype or anything, it basically is me just in my room and then taking the dog for a walk and hanging out with him. So yeah, it's been a little bit more difficult. And obviously with everything happening in the world and, worrying for all the friends that I have around the world, it's been a lot.
Yeah. Well, the cliche thing to do would be to say something positive here, but I don't think I will, other than this, that we can be your friends. You hang out with us during the fall, which is such a delight for us, two years
Which is
running.
exactly what I'm doing, yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if you would stay on the line for a little bit. Davey is going to introduce a pair of haikus from Tanya Foster's book, A Swarm of Bees in High Court. And maybe you'll be one of the people I'll ask to respond to that. Does that sound like a good thing?
It does, yeah.
Okay. Davey, would you unmute and read for us the pair of haiku that you've selected from this relatively new work to ModPo?
Sure. I'm going to go ahead and read the last pair, which is as follows. She wants a sleep that shudders thought like the sparse corner bodega. She wants a sleep shut against the neighborhood graffiti of noise.
Okay, so in a minute, I'm going to ask you to read those again. And I'm going to ask Amber Rose, Max, and Kamara, Amber Rose, Max, and Kamara, and then Ton to respond. And then, Davey, you can add a final word on that. So you want to read it again, and we'll turn then to Max first.
Okay, sure. As follows. She wants a sleep that shudders thought like the sparse corner bodega. She wants a sleep shut against the neighborhood graffiti of noise.
Thank you. Max, start us anywhere. Just give us a brief observation or thought about the structure or about what's being said there?
Sure. I'm getting these strong imagist references in images like sparse corner bodega, graffiti of noise, although that feels much more contemporary than anything the imagists would have said, right? But what strikes me, or what makes this poem these poems interesting compared, in this week of the syllabus and compared to the other imagist poems that we've been discussing and typically discuss, is that there's a lot more, there's desire in these poems. She wants a sleep, and there's a desire for something that's rather abstract and hard to measure. For example, the image of sleep is not, that doesn't strike me as an image that William Carlos Williams or HD would write about. It's or maybe Williams would have, but not HD. It feels very, it's intangible, right? And then it's additionally charged with this desire. She wants this, that there's this, and so we get this whole motive from the actor here that's kind of troubling the what we would call the pure imagism of the poem.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you, Max. Amber Rose, what are your thoughts about this?
Yeah, a thought that I'm having is that I think all of the pairs of Foster's haikus seem to be very aware that they are poems on the page. And so I think maybe that's a way that we can think about kind of bridging or pulling forward the Dickinsonian influence kind of into how we're seeing the images. I'm looking at a sleep, and in a previous haiku, a sleep is together as one word and then a sleep, or even the slight difference from Shutter's thought, and then shut is repeats but is separated. So there's a lot of play going on between the visual and the sonic of the poem that's bringing forward these other kind of sensory elements. So building on what Max was just saying, yeah, moving away from just the image to thinking about sound,
Yes.
both in the content and in the experience of the poem.
Yeah, shutter, the word shutters works really, really well. It is, according to Tanya, some kind of slant reference to the Stein Picasso portrait poem, which has all that shutters shut and shutters shut. But it is also a pun, a homophonic pun on shutter, meaning this is a person who's going through some difficult times if you have a single speaker speaking these haiku. And so shutter is a pun, the kind of pun that the images might not have done, preferring the image of the shutters. Thank you, Amber Rose. And Kamara, what are your thoughts about this?
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about this sleep thing and sleep and rest and what this she in the poem, or what the poem's creation of sleep might mean. And I think one way I've been thinking about it is what sleep does in these two haikus. In the first, sleep that shutters, so the sleep that can shut or shutter, or I also think just shh, that can quiet sound wise. And then in the second, she wants the sleep shut. So the sleep is something that can close or can be a barrier, or that can do some type of action to protect almost, or push against something. So I think what this pair of haikus in the poem itself makes me think of is many different ways in which we can the many different significances of rest and sleep that are gendered, that are foreclosed upon some and privileged to others, and that are not only about a body in a bed, you know. So yeah.
That's great. Tan, do you want to make an observation about the discussion or about the poems?
Sure. It's kind of funny that I, as a deaf person, am responding to a poem that I haven't seen, because I have to rely on sound only, which basically makes it a very interesting experience, because I have no idea about the wordplay. I don't separate the words anymore. It's just like sounds. And so what it leads to me in that poem is that it sounds very angular. First of all, like this is the first thing that I thought of. I'm like, oh, it has a lot of edges. And it has a lot of corners, and it kind of like wraps around itself, but in a very kind of sharp way that isn't comforting.
Yeah.
And is at the same time. And that, like with the words that I could hear, like with Sparse Corner of the Bodega and the Graffiti of Noise, it really reminded me a lot about, going to sleep when anxious. And this is a surprisingly accurate portrayal of just like deep-seated anxiety that creates that white noise in your brain that makes it absolutely impossible for you to fall asleep then. And I love it. So, like last season, let's say, I kind of had a galaxy brain moment that I can perceive poems through sound when I don't understand the meaning. And this is how I approached this one. But also it led me to actually an observation that I had this week. With this week's poems, I had two. One of them is something that is a response to something that Davey said before, that imagism is a way of dealing with trauma. And then Jake brought up the fact that, California is burning. And so we all I'm not in California, but Siberia is always burning. And there's always smog or pollution or something. And when you go to social media pretty much every day, you see a picture or two of smoggy sky when you don't see anything but just gray chemicals. Which definitely does remind me of imagism. And what it also reminds me of is that feeling of, you see it too, right? I am not the only one who sees this from my window, right? This is real. And I didn't like imagism at first, and that now that we have that conversation here, I'm thinking that maybe it is a way of almost validating your existence and validating your just extremely messed up circumstance in which you're in, being like, okay, I'm not the only one who sees this. I'm not the only one who experiences this. My emotion here is it's not even relevant that much because we're all going through it. What is relevant is getting a confirmation that I'm not sitting here alone, choking on chemicals or watching the sky burn or doing looking at whatever it is. I am not the only person who does that. And if I look at imagism from that lens, it becomes almost communal.
Yes. Ton, that was what you said just now is terrific, as always. I just want to draw out 2 points you made. One is a rereading of Graffiti of Noise, that phrase, for me at least, into a kind of white noise background. But the second is the last point you made, which is the idea that people in California can look to the sky and see what people in Siberia can see, which is a strange version of the everyone that I was talking about before. Everyone is smarter than anyone. So it takes that kind of ironic unity. Thank you, Ton. Thank you so much. It's great to hear you. And would you then say bye-bye, hang up, and I hope you'll call us soon again at another webcast.
I am planning to.
Okay, great. Be well. Thank you, Tom.
Yeah. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye. Chris, I think what we're going to do is we're going to start to wrap up. So if you get another call, let me know who's called and we can get back to them. What I'd like to do, friends, is go around twice. The first, but it's got to be brief. Yeah, Jake's thinking, how are we going to do that? The first one is real brief. It's going to be everyone just throwing out a little bit of cheerleading about week 4, which is Gertrude Stein, but also Tristan Zara, the Baroness. Just a little plug for week 4. I expect it to be about Stein. I want to give Bob Perlman, as our special guest, slightly more than a quick 15 seconds on that topic to prep us for Stein. Then we'll go around once more for final thoughts. So be efficient about this. And so, and Davey, I would invite you also to take an extra second to say something about why you chose that, the pair of haiku. All right, so let's start with Allie Castleman, Sorry No Warning. Any ballyhoo for Stein Week, for week 4?
Yeah, I think what Tom was saying about listening with their just listening is a really good place to start in terms of just enjoying Stein without worrying too much at first about trying to make sense of her.
Wonderful, thank you, Allie. Kamara, anything about next week people should get excited about or be warned about?
I was gonna say that in the ModPo Plus, well, oh, actually, never mind. My idea left me like a dagger. I would just say to second listening, and listening openly and again, if you have time.
Fantastic. Okay. Jess?
Yeah, it's no secret. I'm a big fan of Gertrude Stein. And I think that with Stein, we will encounter a very different mode of precision that is very expansive and capacious. Sometimes difficult, but also really rewarding. And another thought that I had was, we like to quote this idea of the difference is spreading with Stein. I love that this has become a sort of catchphrase among folks.
Yeah.
And it made me think that, with imagism, it's like, it can sometimes feel to me like the likeness is condensing. Everything feels very tight. And so I just want to say that if you're sort of struggling this week with the imagism, it's gonna broaden out.
Wow. Yes, you did. I'm so glad we're going around like this, because what you just said is so framing, so perfectly framing. That's why I like ModPo. A survey course gets to do these kinds of things. And then suddenly smart people say these things that are really, really worth writing down and remembering. Thank you so much. Dave, quick thought on week 4.
I plug this every year, but in the main syllabus, there is a link to a video of a modern dance troupe performing to one of Stein's poems. And it's actually listed as a reading, but it says watch a dance choreographed to Stein's If I Told Him. I would recommend that to everybody. It really, really helped me. So
fantastic.
That.
Jason, thanks, Dave. Jason, quick thought on week 4. You're muted, Jason.
Apropos of having been muted, I would say if you're having trouble reading Stein on the page, make sure you read Stein aloud, even if your family or friends are nearby. But kind of savor the sound and rhythm, and also think about Stein is kind of doing with, like, maybe going back to the blackbird's eye, it's kind of like seeing language through the blackbird's eye as something brand new and strange and bizarre and full of potential.
Thank you, Jason. Fantastic suggestion. Jake Marmer.
Just because everybody's talking about Stein, I want to put a plug in for Tristan Zara, who's in there too. And what I keep thinking about in regard to Zara is his great idea of taking a newspaper and cutting it up and mixing phrases in a bag, and then says, you spread them out and the poem will be like you.
Yeah.
And I love that, and I love thinking about how almost prophetic it was now when there's all this like media coming at us, and it's remixing and mixing in the bag that is our head, and it is like us.
Love that. Yes, that's in the last part. Week 4 is divided into 2. It's first Stein, and then there's some other figures, and that's where you're going to find Zara. Thank you, Jake. Lily?
I would say don't sleep on the series of readings that are called like read Stein on the noun, read Stein on narrative. Not that they're not good to go for if you're looking for an explanation, like a definitional explanation or a guideline, but I think if those are terms that you feel comfortable with and it stresses you out to be like, I don't know what a noun means when I read Tender Buttons, I think pairing your reading of Tender Buttons with Stein on the noun might help a bit.
Fantastic suggestion. Thank you, Lily. Erica?
I would say, along the lines of what Lily is suggesting, in both ModPo Plus and in the main syllabus, there's a lot of supplementary videos that I think are really helpful to make Stein a little bit more tangible for people. And I would definitely recommend, there are a couple by our friend Bob Perelman that are terrific, including one that is about the Stein's continuous present.
Yeah, that's a great one. Bob has 2 or 3 of those, he and Rachel. They're really helpful. Ambrose?
Hello, yes. Okay, so I was also thinking about those statements like Lily mentioned on the noun, and I just want to read this one tiny line that says on the noun, that says, nouns are the name of anything. And just naming names is all right when you want to call a roll, but is it good for anything else? So if you're wondering, like, where are the people, places, and things, I have nothing to hold on to. Know that Gertrude Stein is intentionally interested in the actions, in the movement, in the things that happen to and around nouns. So get in that sway in between all the stuff.
Great recommendation. Davey, I want to turn to you for a thought on Stein, but also a quick response to the Tanya Foster.
I just want to, on my thought on Stein, I just want to extend from what Ambrose was just saying about the ways that nouns move. And if it's been grounding to you to think about relationships between human speakers and other stuff in the images poems, that method might also be useful to you for Stein, although quite differently. Nouns, as Ambrose is suggesting, do very different things in Stein, but the relationship between humans and non-human objects in particular, but also non-human living beings is of interest to Stein. And like trying to think about that and thinking seriously about your own relationship to non-human objects and like how weird that relationship is might help with some of the unfamiliarity of Stein. And on the haiku, I just want to point out something wonderful that Tan said, which helped me think about the angularity of the poems, which helped me think about the way that these poems are synesthetic and the way that the images poems aren't. The images poems are meant to be precise about one sense, about seeing, and the Foster poems are uninterested in a single sensory precision. They're uninterested in the idea that you can just see something or just hear something as a mode of access and have that be precise, and that precision is always a relation between senses, which I think is something that's great about the poems and great about what Tom had to say about them.
Thank you, Davey. That's fantastic. Okay, so I want to turn to Bob and invite him to say something about Stein, but then we're going to do a lightning round of final words, really lightning, like it could be as quick as goodbye and it was great to be here. It could be one thought, but it's got to be quick. Bob, but you as our special guest have the floor. Talk about Stein in a way that we have, thousands of people in ModPo and many of them have never read Stein before.
Well, let's see. Stein is the master of creating difference out of sameness. So she will, some of her famous sentences, like describing Oakland, that there is no there. Just that you have those 2 words, there and there, and the first there is, there's nothing happening there. There's no civic center there. So she's does that all the time. That she likes putting words together that kind of look, that look exactly the same, but the meanings flicker and can change. So she's both addressing your eye and the processing part of your mind, but also the reflective part of your mind at the same time. So she's extremely interesting, and the more you actually read her words, the more fun I think you will have.
Yeah. Thanks, Bob. So we're going to go around for final words, but meantime, will you, Bob, get to your own book and look at page 65, and we'll conclude the webcast with you reading the poem that refers to Stein called Home from the Oracle. All right, so this is a challenge. This is a challenge, people. Final words that are brief, really quick, just a thought, something today that happened that you wanted to emphasize. Here we go, starting with Allie. Final thought, quick.
I'm just thinking about nature as a retreat, and then the ways that we've been talking about the kind of like perversions of nature, or nature under the pressures of like human effect. And I'm thinking about The Rose is Obsolete in relation to that. So I'd encourage people to spend some time with that poem, maybe with that lens.
Great, thank you, that was great. Kamara is next, and then Jess is on deck.
I'm really thankful for Foster's poems this week, because I sent some of them to my mom to see what she thought about the mustards line, and she said, I sent her the haiku. She said, "What do you think?" And she said, "Put sugar in her mustard greens, maybe." That's how I interpret it. Mustards are bitter. That's why I always cook collards. They're sweeter. So that's it. I'm thankful for that poem.
That's wonderful. Love that. Jess and then Dave.
Likewise, it was great to have some discussion of the Foster haiku, and specifically this idea of a multi-sensory imagist mode, one that's more oriented towards sounds, or as oriented towards sounds as toward the visual.
Great. And Stein moves us in that way too. So it kind of a nice transition to Stein. Dave and then Jason.
Just a quick thought on Stein, and I don't claim to fully understand or be an expert on Stein, but I know from my own experience, Stein's hard, and I feel like struggling with Stein and trying to understand what's going on can make it worse. And sometimes it's one of those Zen things where you have to just struggle and then put it away, and then it'll just come to you in a moment of silence. So don't worry about struggling. It's too easy to dismiss upon a first reading as gobbledygook, the nursery or Mother Goose of Montparnasse. Don't worry about that. Just hang in there and it'll come.
Fantastic. Jason and then Jake.
Well, I'm super glad I got to be part of this. And about Stein, what we've said about Stein on the noun, to like basically a noun, instead of being a direct pointing to an object that brings you that object whole, like your dog bringing you the newspaper. A noun is an action, and the word noun itself is a noun. So I will cryptically say that one of the things Stein is doing is unnouning the world.
I love that. Thank you, Jason. Jake and then Lily.
I'm particularly grateful to Sharon and for her reading of 13 Ways of Looking at the Bird through the lens of the pandemic. I thought like that just gave me shivers. It was like really, really powerful and memorable. And I want to look at the poem again and look at and try to relive that experience. Thank you for that.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jake, and thank you, Sharon. Lily and then Erica.
I want to shout out something that I think Amber Rose said at the beginning of the webcast, which was that the images poems this week really foreground looking and like the politics and framing of looking at other things. And I just thought that was a really cool way to frame it. And I'm going to be thinking about that honestly going forward from this point into the rest of the course. I think that's like a great framing think about the rest of our poems.
Wonderful, thank you. Erica, then Amber Rose.
Yeah, I just want to shout out what Bob was saying earlier about Stein as creating difference out of sameness, and encourage people to never be afraid to begin again and again when you're reading her.
Fabulous, thank you. Amber Rose and then Davy.
Thanks, friends. Looking forward to seeing you next week. Let's keep the good shirts going. That's all I'm gonna say.
And the good eyeglasses. Thank you, Amber Rose. It's great to see you. Davy and then Bob.
I'm so distracted by Jake. It's really hard.
Wait, how did he do that? You got to teach that to us. All right. Davy, go ahead. Sorry.
I just wanted to say thanks to the folks who've been coming to my office hour. I'm trying out environmental reading of all 10 weeks of ModPo, which is easier some weeks than others. And it's occasioned really great conversations and some creation of informal alternate syllabi. And so a lot of like resistance and grappling, and they've been the best office hour conversations I've ever had, and folks have been really generous. So I just wanted to say thanks, and come join us if that's a conversation that's interesting to you. Jake, this is amazing, and it's so distracting.
Jake is stealing the show. The medium is the message, Jake. Bob, this is not you reading the poem. This is you making a final thought on the discussion about imagism in week 3, so forth.
I'm just going to continue the theme of thanking, and I would like to thank you, Al, for creating this whole environment that you have been creating over the years, and it's really effective, and it's really it just reaches out to a lot of people on a lot of levels. It really connects with people. You're doing good in the world. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob. And it's been an honor to have you part of this conversation. And we're all looking forward to the reading tonight. Speaking of thank yous, Tara and Danny Whitty, thank you for calling in from San Diego. Melissa Silver from Boston. Sharon Wells, not far from Smuggler, packing up in the UK. And Tan from Siberia. I want to remind everybody that Bob's did Bob disappear? I wanted him to read the.
Oh, I'm right here. I'm here.
Good. Bob's reading is at 6 p.m. and I will resend the link to that. It'll be a YouTube reading with a Q&A. I wanted to thank Chris and Zach, who did an absolutely marvelous job. And Chris, after last week, we didn't have any calls. He got more than he could handle, and he did just a beautiful, beautiful job. That was fun. And Zach, amazing as always. Yeah, so I just wanted to shout out one thread, which is somebody named Matt T. I don't really know Matt from previous years. Maybe Matt is new. Has created a thread called "Thoughts on What Makes a Poem Good Enough to Be Selected for This Class." I think taking a cue from the Canon Challenges and from our general more than before transparency about how we create the syllabus and how it's a living document. Took this up. I pinned the thread, and it's had lots and lots of responses where people are asking questions about why this poem is here and what are the categories, and it's really been good, and I highly recommend it. We are going to conclude today with a reading of this one poem by Bob Perlman, and then we're going to say goodbye without any explanation, just the poem. Come back tonight, and maybe there'll be an explanation. Here's Bob.
Okay, it's short, okay? The poem is Home from the Oracle. After all these years, like Stein, to my surprise, I still have to write patriarchal poetry. Jack and Jill went up the hill, which is where they took a pill, and which is where they took turns, as if time was on everybody's side.
Snaps from everybody. Thank you, Bob. Thank you all so much for participating. This was an absolutely fabulous webcast. We'll see everybody in the ModPo site, and then a week from today for another webcast, and tonight at Bob's reading. Thank you all. Have a great day, a
Bye.
great evening, and a great tomorrow.